Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. I invite everyone to rise and join Council in O Canada. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, I had regrets from Councillor Robertson, and I think that covers all of us. That accounts for all of us, I mean. And Council, I'm now looking for declarations of pecuniary interest. Councillor Sanju, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Under Section 4I of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, an exception applies with regard to my declaring pecuniary interest for this matter with regard to confidential item number 1. However, in this particular instance, given the Code of Conduct for members of council and local board members outlining non-pecuniary conflicts of interest, and given the nature of the information provided to council in confidential discussion item number 1, I feel that a potential interest could be construed. Therefore, I choose to recuse myself for this portion of the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Palmer.
I will be excusing myself for the same reasons that Councillor Sandu has just mentioned. I could read it all over again for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I now look for, there we go. I'm now looking for a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Councillor O'Meara, seconded by Councillor Duddick. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and the minutes are approved. And we now come to the Standing Committee and Committee of the Whole reports. And we have before us the reports of the 2019 Budget Committee from January 8th, January 10th, January 22nd. And if we give our attention to Councillor Adams, the chair of the Budget Committee, he has a brief presentation.
This is a test of the operating system. There, it works. And it'll also be a test of this to make sure it goes forward. Thank you very much for your attention this evening. On behalf of the Budget Committee, I'd like to share a few words about the 2019 recommended budget. This budget will keep Oakville at the top of the list when measuring municipal fiscal health. This means that as an Oakville resident, you can continue to feel confident in the high level of services and programs that the town provides, as well as our fiscal health. As a council, we've kept our town finances strong and stable, and property tax increases in line with inflation for many years. We have continuously created efficiencies as we work hand in hand with our partner municipalities in Halton to create efficiencies and collaborating successfully on our shared goals. As I share my comments about these recommendations, I'd like you to consider our strong financial position and the opportunity that our financial stewardship has given and will continue to give our community and our residents the ability to determine what kind of town they want into the next generation. Among other things, our finances have allowed us to provide Oakville with a new hospital, a doubling of our community facilities, high quality programs and services, and infrastructure that's very well maintained on a timely basis. There we go. Members of council, you'll remember that council did give staff a guideline of preparing our budget, keeping overall tax increases in line with inflation for 2019 for consideration by this council. The same direction was given for the preparation of the 2020 budget, and we're well positioned for 2021 as well. The 2019 recommended budget does meet this guideline. The recommended town of Oakville property tax increase is 1.99%, which when combined with the approved region of Halton and the expected education portions of the property tax increase creates the overall increase of 1.53%, which is actually below the latest Toronto Consumer Price Index values of 2.1 to 2.7%, and below the Bank of Canada forecast for 2019 of Canadian CPI returning back up to 2% and long-range forecasts of 2% for 2020. Regarding our neighbors, the 2019 recommended budget proposes the lowest increase among all of our neighbors. In fact, this is at least the 5th straight year that the Budget Committee has recommended to you the lowest increase among our neighbors. These figures here are all from either approved or proposed or previously forecasted budgets for 2019, and they're presented on a comparable basis. I'll note that the higher figures for the other municipalities show the pressures that they're facing as they deal with infrastructure deficits and the need to deal with unfunded infrastructure renewal. Our neighbors are likely to continue to outpace inflation in future years. Mississauga and Brampton, for example, both now have 2% annual infrastructure levies to close their infrastructure gaps. And Oakville, by contrast, has an asset management plan that's fully funded. I also wanted to highlight that a number of these municipalities have not yet even announced their 29 expectations. The only one here that's actually approved their budget happens to be Halton Hills, by the way. Many of these municipalities will only be approving their budgets fully 3 months or later into 2019. And I want to commend our staff for the hard work that they've done, allowing us to consider passing our budget tonight. This is a good governance practice that gives our staff direction regarding the level of resources available to them over the entire year. In fact, Halton Region has recently been given high marks for its budgeting process by the C.D. Howe Institute. While Oakville's wasn't looked at specifically in that study, I'll tell you that our processes closely mirror that of the region and each other. And so on that basis, we would mark high on that set of criteria as well. I also want to highlight the introduction of other types of fees in the GTA that are making tax comparisons more difficult over time. Mississauga, for example, has introduced a stormwater charge. And as you know, Toronto has for many years now had the municipal land transfer tax, which is increasingly reliant upon. And Toronto also has a waste management fee, which also we don't have. These differences make straight comparisons from one to the other more difficult over time. Our property taxes are made up of town, regional, and educational components, and each municipality has a unique breakdown. Some are single tier, and others, some are single tier and others like us are 2-tier systems. And as a result, comparing tax increases from one municipality to the other can be difficult, and that's why reviewing and managing the overall increase, including all 3 of these components, helps to create consistency in the comparison. As a lower tier municipality, the town is one portion of the overall tax bill, and that represents approximately 41% of the total. The remaining 59% is levied on behalf of the region and the province for education purposes. The budget presented today focuses on that 41% share of the overall bill. When this is combined with the region and the education components, it gives you the overall increase that residents see on their tax bill and reflects the cost of providing all municipal services, similar to a single-tier municipality such as Toronto, Hamilton, or Guelph. 8 out of 15 of us, by the way, are also members of the Regional Council, where we've already voted on that part of the budget. Regarding the town-only portion of the total tax increase, that's the 1.99% figure, about half, 50%, relates to maintaining our existing service levels. This is the 0.99% figure that relates to the town base operating budget, which is then combined with the recommended adjustment from the committee. The remaining 50% of the Oakville increase relates to renewing our infrastructure, and that's the 1% capital levy. That funding is important, and it's dedicated to ensuring that our infrastructure isn't crumbling around us. You can see that the overall impact will be the 1.53% increase, which is the lowest increase among all of our local neighbors and quite possibly across the entire GTAH in 2019. The 2019 budget includes total operating expenses of $337 million. Won't go into the details. I know all of you have gone through the budget materials and have been following the budget committee work closely, but I will note that the majority of these costs relate to programs and services that are dear to the daily lives of our families and residents. They include core services like road maintenance and storm sewers and the fire department, libraries, parks and rec, the Oakville Transit, and many others. I also want to point out to both yourselves and to citizens that not all of our expenses are funded by property taxes. This is an issue that comes up regularly in discussions. Only 59% come from property taxes of our funding, that is. By comparison, in 2003, when both myself and a number of the other members of this council came to council, 66% of our revenue came from property taxation, and this drive to protect taxpayers has been an ongoing battle, I'll say, for well over a decade, and has been a consistent focus both here in Oakville as well as the Halton region, with whom we work very closely. Of the $197.6 million in tax dollars being raised in 2019, the larger share actually goes to renewing our capital infrastructure, and that's, of course, closely followed by Oakville Fire Services. We're very proud to be preserving important services for our local families and building and maintaining our infrastructure, unlike a number of other jurisdictions where infrastructure funding is inadequate to repair the aging roads, sewers, and other facilities that they have in their communities. The recommended budget recognizes the work that staff began previously to identify opportunities for savings and efficiencies while protecting resident services. The Budget Committee is recommending to recognize $2.1 million in savings in the 2019 budget through a transfer from the Tax Stabilization Reserve. Council has received a memo regarding the impact to the reserves, which continue to be strong and well positioned. In fact, our stabilization reserves are remaining stronger than those of all of our neighbors. The committee has also recommended deferring the Town Hall feasibility study, recognizing that the need for this project is still a number of years away. We are keeping our municipal house in order through the ongoing discipline of our 1% capital levy and the additional funds that this council has previously brought forward for the special paving levy. We have very high quality infrastructure. Our funding for replacing aging infrastructure more than matches its rate of depreciation. Many municipalities are issuing very significant levels of debt to deal with their infrastructure deficits and gaps. This debt is in fact limiting their ability to make choices about what their communities look like into the future. Residents always tell me at all of our meetings that they appreciate the way council has this commitment to good long-term financial management. So I applaud you for all that work. Oakville's financial health is strong and it's sustained. Our recommendations advocate appropriate debt management. Only about 4% of our debt is actually supported by property taxes. The Oakville Hospital debt is supported by non-tax revenue at Oakville Enterprises Corporation, and development charges, harbors, and the soccer club are supporting other elements of the debt. The LED conversion debt is supported by energy savings generated internally by that project, and our plan places tax levy support debt at about $4.5 million at the end of 2019, and just for the record, going back a number of years, that number was 5 times higher at $24 million in 2006. Just for the record, here's the projected figures for reducing Oakville's outstanding debt at the end of 2019. This chart shows the capital spending by program for 2019. The largest program here is the infrastructure planning, which includes funding for roads, bridges, stormwater projects, and active transportation. With respect to the active transportation funding, staff have noted that funding for these types of projects show up in a multiple set of project listings, and they'll be working to identify these projects more prominently in future years of our budgets. Our 2019 infrastructure work includes Oakville's continued largest ever road resurfacing program at $9.6 million, which equals in scale the projects from last year. It also includes reconstruction and widening of Spears Road from the GO station west of 3rd line to 4th line. Infrastructure planning is closely followed by recreation and culture, which includes funding for the Southeast Community Center, which, by the way, is our largest project in this year. Emergency services includes funding for the commencement of the construction of the new fire station at Pine Glen and Bronte Road. The library funding includes funding for collections at 16 Mile Branch in North Park, and the renovation and construction of a digital hub at the Glen Abbey Library branch. With respect to the major capital projects this year, you'll see that while the two largest projects relate to Southeast Oakville, other projects touch just pretty much every part of town. And as background, the Neighborhood Park 3 is Fowley Park near 6th Line and Wheatboom Drive. In addition, there's the William Rose Park in Dundas, near Dundas and Trafalgar and 8th Line. That project's over $500,000 in funding. Memorial Park is also receiving substantial funding this year. So there are a number of significant projects going on in North Oakville. Combined with the regional and provincial shares, the currently forecasted overall increases for both 2020 and 2021 will be 2%. As in previous years, we'll be reviewing the details of these forecasts. The CEO and his staff have been undertaking service delivery reviews to optimize the delivery of town programs and services to consider alternative service delivery models. We have work to do in each of these years as we open up significant new community facilities across town. I'm confident that we'll be able to reach our goal of keeping the overall increases in line with inflation. And as a reason for my confidence and happiness about this, I'll tell you that last year when we were here, we were forecasting a 2% increase for 2019, and today we're recommending a 1.53% increase. We'll be working towards ensuring smooth future tax increases as we approach the opening of the new community center in South Oakville, as well as the new fire stations and community facilities in North Oakville. Council's already directed staff to prepare the 2020 budget while maintaining overall property tax increases in line with inflation, and we're positioned to do the same for 2021. We'll continue to work towards that important goal. As we consider our forecasts, I also want to have you consider our past increases. I recently reviewed the increases over Oakville's last 21 years, and I noted that not only were tax increases over the last 11 years nearly a full % lower than the average of the increases of the previous 10 years, but the variability of our increases has actually decreased as well. In fact, the variability of our tax increases over the last 11 years has been nearly more than half, actually, of the variability of the previous period of time. You can look at that graph and just see it with your own eyes. Some of you have been on council with me during this time, and I thought that you'd find that to be of some interest. Basically, our increases have been lower, more predictable, and on a downward trend. This has been achieved while working with our sister municipalities of Halton to create efficiencies and effective local governance for us at both levels. So in summary, I'd like to thank all the members of our staff who spent a great deal of time preparing the 2019 budget. In particular, I'd like to thank Gord Lalonde, who's up here, Catherine Hewitson, and Nancy Sully, who, by the way, from behind the scenes has been very helpful for their work during the process this year. Catherine has had a great team of finance professionals working with her behind the scenes as well. They're the various budget managers with each of our program areas, and without them it would have been significantly harder to make the decisions that we are making tonight. I'd also like to thank the members of the public who have come forward with their time to provide us with their thoughts and concerns, not only during the process but throughout the year, as they truly help guide us in our decision making. Finally, I want to thank each of you, my council colleagues, for your trust and your support during the budget process. You've all taken a lot of time reviewing the materials that are before you, taking part in the public discussions. I know each of you have come forward with a great number of questions. I can see the kind of questions that you're bringing forward on behalf of your constituents, and I know how well you've been representing your constituents as a result of that. So I want to congratulate you on that. I'd like to especially recognize Mayor Burton, Councillors Elgar, China, and O'Meara for their efforts on the 2019 Budget Committee this year. Your Worship, it'd be my pleasure to move the recommendations of the Budget Committee at the appropriate time.
I'll take that as your motion, and I'll look for a second. Councillor Elgar, thank you. Are there questions for the Budget Chair? Councillor Sanju.
Just a general question. So when we speak about capital budget, as an aside from the operating budget, I'm trying to understand the different projects that are taking place over the next year, specifically in Ward 7. I understand that there's parks coming into place, but one of the things that's a level of concern for our constituents is the lack of a recreation center being built at the 60 Mile Sports Complex. So can we have a little bit more detail on that?
It's a very good question, and we have had a lot of discussions about it over the last couple of weeks. There are a number of projects coming forward in North Oakville, particularly the parks projects that I described. There is the library project that Councillor Knoll, as the chair of the library, I'm sure can speak to perhaps in much greater detail than I can, but we do have funding for the collections that will go into that library. Councillor Knoll has described to me the details of the way that that space will be used, not only as a library, but also as a program space for the community. It's, I guess you could describe it as a mini community center. Certainly isn't a full one, I get that. But in terms of recognizing the need for facilities, I think we do recognize, all of your council colleagues recognize the need to provide full facilities in new communities. What's on the floor tonight is the 2019 capital budget. This council will be going through a strategic planning process. It will also be going through a review of the Parks and Rec master planning process. So there are a number of opportunities for a complete discussion about what the priorities of the community are around what facilities and when they should appear and how they should get paid for. But that's what we have before us tonight. Does that provide enough information to you?
It does. Thank you very much. And just another quick thank you to the Budget Committee and all of staff. I know how much time the budget takes to make sure that it's prepared and ready for us, and I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Adams, for your presentation, and thank you to the Budget Committee for all of the hard work that's gone into this over the past few weeks. I am supportive of the 2019 operating budget. However, also disappointed that the 16 Mile Community Center has been pushed out even further into the capital budget. I'm happy to see that there will be a library coming to North Oakville. I know a lot of work was done on that, and an additional park. And I have voiced it to my council members and staff as well, and I look forward to working with my council colleagues and staff to find a solution on building a much-needed community center in North Oakville sooner than the projected date of 2027. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Are there others? Seeing none, I'd like to take a chance to offer a few remarks. The tax increase trend before I became mayor was upward in direction and higher than inflation. We turned that trend around 10 years ago when we adopted the same budgeting tool used by major corporations, performance-based program budgeting, or PB2. PB2 is a budgeting discipline that operates at the staff level and continually seeks improvements in efficiency. Our window on council into that process is with our annual budget direction. With this year's PB2 budget, we again kept our promise to keep any increase to the total property tax bill at or below the rate of inflation. This year, we've kept the town-only portion increase to less than inflation, too. We've been using efficiencies before taxes to fund our needs. In the same time frame, we have doubled the town's community facilities and increased our service levels, whether it's snow clearing or transit or fire protection or infrastructure maintenance and renewal, rather than freezing or cutting them, and we've climbed from 30th to first place in the Money Sense rankings as Canada's best place to live. It is also true that our property tax burden as a percent of household income is almost the lowest in the province, while our service levels are the best. About 3 years ago, the Institute on Municipal Finance and Governance recognized us as the municipality with the strongest and healthiest finances. Great things are possible when we work smarter and work together. What we must do to stay on this path is to avoid cost drivers such as population growth. Yes, in Ontario, it is provincial policy that growth causes taxes because for 22 years, the province has forbidden municipalities from collecting more than about 75% of the costs of growth. The province requires existing taxpayers to pay about 25% of the costs of growth. And because the market sets the prices of housing, no benefit actually goes to new home buyers. The province's approach only serves to fatten developer profits. Developer welfare makes our property taxes about 10% higher than they would be without this penalty on growth. The Government of Ontario said when it imposed this burden on us in 1997 that it did not want municipalities to be able to use growth to improve themselves. Stop and think about that way of thinking, if thinking is what you can call that. In response, in the last 12 years, We have worked hard to cut in half the rate of growth of Oakville's population. In August, the Premier said in a speech in Ottawa, and I quote, "My friends, we are going to grow this province faster than the province of Ontario has ever grown in the history of the province of Ontario," unquote. We are hoping for this government to fix the unfair burden on existing property taxpayers who should not be paying for growth. We're also hoping that in their ongoing review of the growth plan, they will realize that the province has not been keeping up with its duty to support growth with the necessary schools, teachers, transportation, transit, health funding, and long-term care beds and housing for seniors, and they either need to live up to their responsibilities or they've got to help us stop growth. Today was the second of 2 days in which I had the opportunity with the chair of the region of Halton to meet with key ministers in the provincial government, and I came away with a great deal of hope that they seem to recognize that this is a problem. And they were asking interesting questions about how to change the way we fund growth. And the chair and I agreed that this is a very important sign of interest and that we will be following up on it with longer, in-depth meetings with the different ministers with whom we met to follow up on some of our key concerns here. So I believe that we may be on the threshold of some improvement in this area. This is the right budget for our times. It's a pleasure to support it. No budget can do everything all at once, and this budget leaves some work for tomorrow. I acknowledge that. Our phasing of things over time and our steady fiscal discipline have earned us our status as the municipality with the strongest and healthiest finances. This helps make us Canada's best place to live. And I'll now call the vote, and I would ask for a recorded vote. If you wish to be recorded in support of the resolution to approve the budget, please rise to be named. Councillor Sanju, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Lischina, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Longo, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Haslett-Thiel, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Dudek, Councillor O'Meara, and myself, Mayor Burton. I declare the measure carried unanimously. Thank you. I think you're going to be well served by the results of this budget. I would now ask for a mover and a seconder to approve the Community Services Committee report, although if there are no separations.
Your Worship, I have a couple separations with respect to agenda item number 1, page 47, Community Services, Coronation Park, and also separate discussion item 6, Administrative Services Committee, with respect to the Kerr Street mission. Thank you.
All righty, any other separations? Can I have a mover and seconder for the report? Councillor Dudek and Councillor Giddings. May I call the vote on the balance of the Community Services report, everything except item number 1? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Councillor Chisholm, you have the floor on item number 1.
Thank you, Your Worship. In reviewing the report with respect to Coronation Park, I do have a motion I'd like to speak to with respect to the report that was forwarded to us from staff. I'm of the opinion, reading the report, we have some challenges with Coronation Park, but it's the only park that we have in Oakville that has the ability to accommodate special events. The challenge is what the propensity of special events go on at that park, and I do have some questions of staff later with respect to what we can provide and facilitate at that park. It seems apparently where I'm reading on the report, it's an issue with the flooding and the weather patterns and so forth and the challenges we have in that park. But I'm convinced it's not the complete park that is being flooded, and there are possible areas of the park that still can maintain or facilitate events. With that, I would like to hold off and ask the questions of staff because I do have some specific questions, and I would gather council members have some questions regarding Coronation Park and the recommendations. At this point in time, I'm not. I would wait to move my motion, and I think I might have a friendly amendment from one of the other councillors. Thank you.
So, do you wish to
Ask the
defeat
questions
the
now?
committee's recommendation? Do you wish to refer the committee's, do you want to refer the item back? What would you like to do?
I would like to make amendments to the recommendations made in the report. I'd like to remove and submit, and I do have copies of the motion.
This is the time.
Okay. Can I have these put out to staff or excuse me, members of council?
That would be a great idea.
Thank you. Thank you. Your Worship, would you like me, once they've been distributed, to read the motion?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. Your Worship, just a point of clarity, do we have to defeat the motion that was made at Community Services with approval of this report as it stands?
Well, if your wishes are contrary to that recommendation, I think you have to defeat it. It's duly moved and it's available to be voted on. As I look at what you've distributed, I don't know if it's fully contrary to the report. Can I read, for everybody's benefit, the recommendation from the committee? Moved by Councillor Adams that the report from Recreation and Culture in Parks and Open Space Departments be received. 2, that for 2019 and beyond, Coronation Park not be permitted for large-scale special events with the exception of the Terry Fox Run and the Courage Polar Bear Dip, and staff report back within a year. 3, that picnic permits for groups of less than 100 and commercial film permits be issued on a shortened timeline of 60 days preceding the event, and that any additional special event requests only be permitted if they meet conditions outlined in this report. And if what you want to do is to, I've scanned your recommendation, it looks to me like you want to make some changes to item number 2, which limits the large ones to those 2.
Correct.
And then, and the other material appears to me to be modifications without being against the spirit of item number 4. And so I'm not sure that I think you'd be okay to move amendments. Amendments are not in order when you're trying to reverse the meaning of a motion, but otherwise amendments are in order.
So would it be regarded as a friendly amendment to the report?
Well, friendly is not a parliamentary term. It's not in our code of conduct, in our procedure bylaw. It's an amendment.
Okay. So with that in mind, do you want me to read the?
Yes.
Okay, so here we go. That for 2019 and beyond, Coronation Park be permitted for special events that are scalable in nature to maximize the use of the park that is deemed low risk, the flooding areas within the park itself. Also, consideration be given for extended event programming when appropriate in the high-risk flood areas within the park that are approved, and that the approval be the responsibility of the Director of Parks and Open Space. And that staff report back on the feasibility of developing a weekly summer concert series to be staged at Coronation Park Bandshell for the months of June, July, and August 2020, with the intent the concert series to be sponsored by local businesses. And that staff, as part of the Parks and Recreation and Library Master Plan, address the possible development and design of a future event park that would accommodate major and community events.
Right. And you need a seconder for your amendment. Councillor Duddick seconds it. Discussion? Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did actually have a friendly amendment if the mover would see such at the very end of that last paragraph. And it would go, and that staff collaborate with Visit Oakville on their strategic master plan.
All we need is a seconder for your sub-amendment. Councillor Dudek seconds. Is there discussion of Councillor O'Meara's amendment? Councillor O'Meara's amendment. Councillor Sanju.
I think it's the right place for me to say this, but I was just going to suggest a potential date to be added for when that possible development and design of future event park information should be provided back to council.
That actually needs to wait.
Okay.
Councillor O'Meara's amendment's on the floor, so
Got it.
any discussion of his amendment? May I call the vote on his amendment? All those in favor? That carries. Now we are back to Councillor Chisholm's amendment, and Councillor Sanju, I think you're in order now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my recommendation is just that we attach a date so that we know when that information will come back to council.
You're talking about the Parks, Rec, and Library Master Plan?
Correct.
We're doing that later this year, and he's asking for this to be included in that work. So you can set a date, but you'd be affecting, I would recommend against it. Staff are working on that. We know it's coming.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Giddings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions for clarification. Councillor Chisholm talks about permitting uses that are scalable. I'm curious about that one, whether that's a number of people or length of time of the event. Also, consideration be given for extended event programming where appropriate in high flood risk areas. I don't quite follow that, and whether we'd be looking for staff, if we were to continue offering events at this location, couldn't the rental agreement or the usage agreement include a contractual clause outlining cancellation in case of any of those risks that were mentioned before?
To whom are you directing your question?
Councillor Chisholm.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, through your worship. Thank you, Councillor Giddings. The scalable, to qualify it, I guess we could have made a longer recommendation here, but the scalable is based on what the physical park can accommodate at that time. Scalable, the challenge we have when you look at special events, there's different degrees and definitions what a major special event is versus a community event. So what I'm suggesting is what available property we have to be used for events is scaled to the appropriate physical layout of the park that can be used at that time. And what was your second question, Councillor Giddings?
An insurance policy.
I would defer to staff. I would assume there's an insurance policy with respect to the events through the process. They have to have at least $5 million liability. I'm not.
Let me ask council the question.
Oh, cancellation.
Are we at a point in this discussion where it's starting to look like this would be better all referred back to staff? Could I suggest that because these are not against the spirit of the committee report, that you, if it's your wish to do this, a mover and a seconder to refer the proposed amendments to staff for a report would be in order, and you could then, if it were your wish, adopt the committee report, and when you have the report from staff back, you could then amend the policy you're creating tonight. Would that be something you'd like to do?
I guess the question, what are we referring back to the staff?
So this would,
So clear.
if you're following me, you would refer the amendment proposed by Councillor Chisholm to staff for a report. Assuming you do that, you would then have the option of adopting the committee recommendation and then changing the committee. That would then be our policy until the report came back and you made whatever adjustment to the policy the report led you to want to do. Councillor Dudek.
I wonder if we could also, if we are going to be referring back to staff, and I agree, because there's a lot of variables here that need to be answered prior to making some sort of a decision. Is there an opportunity to obtain some data, information that may not have been available up to this point, whether it's the parking constraints, whether it's the safety, the flooding, the noise, all those other things that are associated with a large-scale event? So maybe that can be included.
I think that'd be, yes, certainly it can. I had hands down here. Can I go to this side of the table? Who's first? Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Actually, referral was what I was going to suggest. In the words of the late, great Councillor Fred Oliver, doing committee work at council often causes more problems than solutions. And we have a number of variables, especially having this band shell with the concert series. How would we scale that? How would we get it running? And so I believe that our best option would be, and if the staff is okay with even referring agenda item 1 back, we can just take this whole thing full cloth, send it back to staff. And
So, Councillor, thank you for your motion to refer to staff for a report, the amendment proposed by Councillor Chisholm. Is there a second for that? There's no second for that. Councillor Duddick is seconding that. May I call the vote? All those in favor? That is carried. We have moved the report, item number 1 from the committee. Madam Clerk, do you want to remind us who moved and seconded the main report? CSC report, the balance of CSC. Stumped you, did I?
Yes. I believe it was
Councillor O'Meara and Councillor Duddick. All those.
Sorry, Your Worship, just a point of order here. So my amendment that passed, are those comments still going to be taken into consideration when it's referred back?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel.
Just for clarity, so are we endorsing the policy that was put forward at CSC, or are we referring it all back?
We've just referred the proposed amendment. We're adopting the policy until we change it as a result of whatever comes back.
So am I allowed to move that we do not adopt the policy and rather have them come back with a, based on?
I think your desired motion is to refer to staff item number 1 to be included in the report.
Correct.
All right. Is there a seconder for the referral motion? Councillor Elgar. May I put the vote? All those in favor? Item number 1 is referred. The matter is now dispatched. Councillor, let's see now. I need a mover and seconder for the ASC committee report. Councillor Knoll and Councillor Longo. And I have a separation request from Councillor Chisholm on item number 6. So, Councillor Chisholm.
Must be my night. Thank you, Your Worship. In our haste, and this is some house cleaning, and we were moving very quickly, we did approve the Kerr Street Community Services assistant request, but there were 2 options, and we made approval, but we weren't specific on the option that we approved. And may I suggest, well, I'm going to put it forward that we approve the community assistance to Kerr Street Ministries for $2,926 funded from the corporate contingency. That was what we approved, but it wasn't noted in the minutes of the last administrative services meeting.
All right. It's either a correction of the minutes or it's an amendment, but either.
Correction of the minutes.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Knoll. Or let me go to the way end of the table. I saw Councillor Sanju. So this is an amendment by Councillor Chisholm and Councillor Sanju to specify the source of the funds. May I put the vote? All in favor? And that's carried. And now I have a motion for the adoption of the Administrative Services Committee, including item 6 as amended, and the confidential report of the closed session of the Administrative Services Committee. May I put the vote? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you, everybody. We worked our way through that parliamentary procedure, I think. And now, thank you for that. Actually, yeah, I don't think we need that. Okay, council has just made a number of appointments to our advisory and other committees, and these will be posted by the clerks and released to the media tomorrow. They're very numerous, so I'm not going to read them all. I thought you would approve, thank you. The first item on the agenda is the Integrity Commissioner Council Code of Conduct and Council and Staff Protocol report from the Clerk's Department. And there's a revised recommendation, a memo that's been distributed to you. And, okay. For your assistance, let me ask if there's I'd like to take this in steps. As your chair, I'll volunteer to separate this into its items. And the first one, but I would look for a mover and seconder of them all. Can I have that? Councillor Chinna and Councillor Parmer. So the first one is, that I'll call the vote on, is one, that the report from the Clerk's Department dated December 21st regarding the Integrity Commissioner, Council Code of Conduct, and Council and Staff Protocol be received. May I put the vote? All in favor? That carried. Number two is that a working subcommittee of council be established for the purpose of supporting a review of principals integrity, the town's integrity commissioner, of the draft council and staff protocol policy, the council code of conduct, and any related protocols, including the integrity commissioner, inquiries, advice, procedure, consisting of the following members: myself as mayor, and a number of councillors. Councillor Adams, do you have a motion?
I have checked in with my colleagues, and I propose the following: Mayor Burton as chair, Councillors Chisholm, Sandu, Grant, Adams, Elgar, and Haslett Thiel. That would make the list.
All right, is there a discussion? Are you happy with that? It's moved. May I put the vote? All those in favor? You were happy with it. It carries unanimously. Number three, this is where I'm not sure whether we'll agree, that the working subcommittee meet February 4th at 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. and make recommendations regarding revisions to the council and staff policy, etc. I would like to propose that we change the start time. So I'm going to ask your indulgence to change the start time to 3 p.m. and I'll tell you why. 3. And here's why. February 4th, between 11 and 2:30, is when the Municipal Governance Review advisors are going to be interviewing the chair and the mayors of the 4 local municipalities in half-hour individual sessions, separated by 15 minutes, according to their letter. And so it would be, I think, strategic and tactical to start at 3, because I could be otherwise occupied, and something that might be just a touch more important. Councillor Adams.
I have no objection to 3 o'clock, but council has just named you chair, and by the terms of reference, the time and date can be changed by the chair.
Well, outstanding, but I don't want to, because this is the will of council in this resolution, I thought maybe it would be efficient to change it to 3. Councillor Sandu.
Question just around the length of the time that we would be there. What time would we go until if we were to start at 3? Could I assume a 4-hour session?
Could I offer you a 3-hour session, 3 to 6?
I would be fine with that, but perhaps we would like to check in with Mr. Ray Green because he has a meeting booked at that same time.
Mr. Green.
We'd be happy to reschedule that meeting, but we do have at 7 o'clock that night the special council meeting dealing with the strategic plan and other matters.
Yeah. If we can't finish our business in one meeting, we can have another.
Your worship?
Councillor Chisholm.
So we're clear, this meeting coming at 3 p.m., we're not negating the 7 o'clock special meeting. We're not canceling that. Okay, good. So I wasn't sure. Thank you.
So now that everybody's clear on this, may I call the vote on item number 3? All those in favor? Opposed to fitting, and that does carry. Thank you, everybody. Now, council, we have a confidential item, a litigation update, and you have a report from the legal department. And in that report, the town solicitor is looking for instructions, and the public motion is that the report be received and the solicitor be instructed to proceed as set out in the report. Before I ask you to move or second or vote on that, I want to know if you need to go into camera to receive legal advice. Councillor Elgar moves that we go into camera for the purpose of receiving advice, subject to solicitor-client privilege and the communications for that purpose. It's seconded by Councillor Knoll. May I put the vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any? And we will dismiss our... Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we act on that, we have requests for reports, and one of them is moved by Councillor Sanju and seconded by Councillor Palmer. And another one is moved by Councillor Sanju and seconded by Councillor Knoll, and another moved by Councillor Sanju and seconded by Councillor Palmer, who are generating a lot of work here tonight. So perhaps we could, I'll just use the procedure bylaw actually gives me the discretion to jump, move items on the agenda. Let's dispatch the request for a report. Let me try something here. It's permitted under our procedure to do a gang motion. Are there any reports? Let's find out if there's any reports here that you're not willing to authorize. May I have a motion to approve all the requests for reports? Councillor Duddick.
Sorry, Your Worship, I'd like to remove my request given the referral of the item from CSE back. I think that was contingent on the other, so.
Are you talking about 27 Walker Street?
No, I'm talking at the very bottom, one moved by me regarding Coronation Park.
Ah, yes. Okay. I'll still look for a motion for all the remaining requests.
Worship, just one other, I would like to make a change in the Pine Grove Road traffic calming.
Yeah.
That staff be directed to prepare a report outlining recommendations for changes to the traffic calming on Pine Grove Road as soon as possible. Just taking out by the second quarter of 2019. Thank you.
That's what my copy has always said. Thank you very much. Still looking for a mover. Councillor Duddick and a seconder. Councillor Lischina. May I call the vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any, and the requests, as changed, are approved. We're going into camera now. By popular request, we're also going to, I guess we're going to do the rest of the agenda. And Councillor Elgar, you have the floor for status of outstanding issues.
And I notice when I read here, it sounds like nobody has contacted the staff to get approval for this to continue. And I just want to make sure that is correct. And would it be, has staff contacted the appropriate personnel on this issue? I realize it's now in Ward 1, but it was a big issue for the seniors and the residents at, up at Dundas and Bronte Road area.
I have a signal from Councillor O'Meara that he'd like the floor. And does staff want to answer Councillor Elgar first, or would you like to wait and see what else Councillor O'Meara might add to this?
Through you, Mayor Burton, I'd have to look into that matter and come back to staff.
Okay, Councillor O'Meara.
Sorry, Your Worship, I was just indicating I had an item after. I'm okay with Councillor Elgar's.
Okay. Maybe I can follow up. I'll talk to Councillor Muir because it's now part of his ward, but just so we get them moving, because I think they still want it badly. Now, if we could move on then to under, and this is where I'm confused. On page 17, it's number 3. It's high school at Niagara and Dundas, and it's expected report back on the first quarter of 2019. But when I flip through to number 5, it kind of, I'm confused as to fourth quarter 2019. It seems like it's probably the same thing. I'm just trying to understand what's happening there. You can help me out. And that'll be my.
Right now, the part of the issue is in the secondary plan, there is an age set until the final determination of the school. There's nothing that can stop, and certainly if the commissioner was, Jane Closey was here, she could put it better in planning speak, but at the end of the day, if a property owner wishes to have the age removed, they can apply to the town for removal of that age.
Have any applications for removals of H's in that area been given to the town thus far? Do we know?
Not at this point.
Okay. I think that answers
So,
your question.
Counselor, I just want to help you with a couple of bits.
Please.
The board has not bought the property, and Counselor Elger and I think, would agree that the matter goes back 18 to 20 years.
So it predates my time in Ward 7, is what you're saying?
Yes. And I guess the other thing that you need to know is the school board doesn't have approval to build the high school from the province. And in fact, I believe there's 3 schools that they had funding and approval for that have been canceled or frozen by the province. And so there's a bit of a discussion going on with the Ministry of Education about whether or not the province is in the business of education anymore.
Got it.
If I can say it that cheekily.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question just on that piece? So if we're thinking about this purely from a school's perspective, and I realize that we receive funding from the province, have we heard or understood that there was any application even for tender for a potential build of a high school in that area, or no?
Absolutely not,
Okay, so we haven't even gotten to that point yet.
no,
Got it.
no. And for the last few years, schools have been, I mean, this is not the time to go into it, but there's a lot of schools that we're missing in Halton.
Right.
And in my budget speech, I mentioned the way it's become systemic and continual, that the province cannot keep up with the growth that it orders us to facilitate, which is why I've reached the point myself personally that I think we've got to call a halt to it.
Fair enough.
And I'm looking for ways to do that. Councillor Knoll.
I'm sorry, I have one more comment. I'm sorry, Councillor Knoll.
Just think poor old Councillor O'Meara is still waiting for his next item.
I'm sorry, Councillor O'Meara. One last comment, just for my clarity and clarity for people that are watching from home and those in the gallery. The 22% of the budget that is allocated to the school board, that is not provided by the town in any way to help build schools, correct?
That money goes downtown to the Ministry of Education, well, actually it goes to the general revenue of the province, and the Minister of Finance decides how much of the province's revenue will go to the Ministry of Education. And we've wandered far away from the topic, so
I am sorry.
I think maybe we should
Fair.
ask Councillor Knoll if he's talking about the item that's before us.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to just add some additional information, and I apologize. I thought Councillor Elgar was on this email that circulated. This has been a legacy project on the part of Ward 5, and actually the date is 2006 it started as a result of the North Oakville Secondary Plan negotiations. And frankly, in an editorial capacity, it's a disgrace that it's happened this long to the family, the private homeowners that are aging, and expected this to be their retirement annuity that's gone on this long. I have the letter, and I'll circulate it again, from Commissioner Closey that indicates there's a meeting this week with the region to further some progress on the site, and she has indicated that depending on the outcome of that, that she would be prepared to work on other alternatives. So there's work in progress. I'll circulate the email. I apologize. I promised you that I would copy you on that. I didn't. I thought it was done. I believe the Ward 7 councillors have it as well. So, but it's been a long time. 2006.
I have good news, Councillor O'Meara. You have the floor.
Thank you, Worship. This relates to council's information items. On page 86 of our report, email dated December 23rd, 2019, from Mary Jane and George Hutter with regards to a daylight triangle. They've had an ongoing offer or proposal to purchase a little sort of triangle of their property for numerous years. The last correspondence they had with the town was in 2013. They've recently decided that they would like to move and wanted to pursue the purchase of a little daylight triangle there, of which they said that the town's policies have changed and they're no longer offered to buy that little piece. So I'm wondering if staff might just provide a brief report back to council with regards to what the costs associated with that might be, should council decide to go down that path, and perhaps what caveats we might add to that sale or on title to protect the community from any overdevelopment of that little segment of land. I'm wondering if staff might report back at its first convenience, as the owners have been waiting for quite a while on that.
You have agreement from the staff.
Thank you. Do I need a seconder for that?
No, they've.
It is a staff
one of
report.
your? Oh, so what they're saying is, what staff is saying is they'll get it to you as soon as they can.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship.
No. For clarity, a request for report is what's required when the work that the councillor wants staff to do will take more than, I believe, 2 hours of effort. This is not a 2-hour effort. This is a friendly request. It's totally within our rules, and it's only for the for the big work that you've got to get the approval of council. And so Councillor O'Meara, you have the answer of the CAO. He'll be getting it to you as soon as he can. All right?
Okay, thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Elgar.
Just on that issue, do we have a cycle timeline? Would it be 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, a year?
I think we could have the initial report for council's consideration in about a month's time.
I thank you. Thanks.
All righty. Anything else before we go in camera? The reason I ask is we've now dispatched everything in the public agenda, and so anyone who's wondering about anything left on the agenda, there isn't anything left. When we go into camera, we'll be coming back out of camera, adopting the bylaws and adjourning the meeting. And so let me take this moment before we go in camera to share with you that I have issued a proclamation in honor of Black History Month. February is Black History Month. Whereas throughout its long history, Ontario has been characterized and strengthened by its diverse and distinctive cultures, and whereas from the time of its establishment, people of African descent have made significant contributions to the development and betterment of the province, whereas the Black community continues to play a vital role within the social and cultural mosaic that is Ontario, whereas Black History Month was first recognized in Ontario as February 1993, marking the 200th anniversary of the passage of legislation prohibiting the importation of slaves into Upper Canada, whereas Black History Month continues to provide the opportunity to remember and celebrate the contribution that African Canadians have made to Ontario. Now, therefore, I, Rob Burton, Mayor of the town of Oakville, do hereby proclaim February 2019 as Black History Month in Oakville. And thank you very much, Council, for letting me share that with you. Madam Clerk, we now need to arrange the chamber for a meeting closed to the public. And councillors, if you want a brief bio break, this would be a time. All right, council is resuming its public session, having met in a session closed to the public as permitted under the Municipal Act and our procedural bylaw to consider a matter subject to solicitor-client privilege and communications for that purpose. And we now have reached the point in the agenda where we have the consideration and reading of the bylaws, and I'm looking for a mover and seconder. Councillor Longo and Councillor Chisholm. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Actually, the first thing I need to do is I need the motion I read before we went into the closed session. I need a mover and seconder for receipt of the report and the instructions to proceed as provided in the report. Councillor Hazlet-Thiel and Councillor O'Meara, all in favor, opposed if any, and that is carried. And now I'm back to my motion for the bylaws, that the following bylaws be passed: 2019-01, 2019-02, 2019-07, and 2019-19 as presented. All those in favor? Opposed if any? Thank you. That completes our work together. Thank you very much for your time and attention. It's been great working with you, and we are adjourned.